Welcome to the Grateful Living Podcast.
Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Grateful Living Podcast. I'm really glad you're here for today's episode because this one has been sitting with me for quite a while and it came from a moment that honestly stayed with me more than I expected. Today, we're going to be talking about visibility, self-worth, and what it really means to show up in your power, especially when it feels uncomfortable, uncertain, or even vulnerable. Recently, I was at an event and there was one moment that really stood out to me. I watched a woman pack up early. She hadn't really made any sales, and something about that moment just really stayed with me. Not in a judgmental way, but in a very reflective way, because I've been to a few of these events now, and each time I noticed different things. But this time I couldn't stop thinking about her, about what it must feel like to show up, put yourself out there, and leave without the outcome that you were hoping for. And it just made me reflect on so much more than just that moment. It took me back to my own experience of working within sales. I spent almost 2.5 years in the industry, working across 7 different campaigns, both door to door and at live events. In that time, I learned how to pitch products that I didn't create, products that I had to understand, believe in, and communicate clearly from scratch. So being in those environments again now, but in a different perspective, is really interesting because I'm no longer just focused on the pitch itself. I'm noticing the people, the energy, the environment, and more importantly, how people respond when things aren't going their way. What really stood out for me wasn't just the setup of the products or the structure of the event, it was the women. The ones showing up, the ones trying, the ones putting themselves in environments where they're visible, where they had to speak, connect, invite, and be seen. And then the contrast. Some women fully engaging, staying grounded, continuing even when things felt slow, and others quietly packing up early. Not because they didn't care, but because something deeper was happening underneath. And that's what made me pause, because moments like this aren't really about sales, they're about identity. They're about what happens internally when external validation doesn't arrive quickly. They're about the relationship we have with rejection and uncertainty, with being seen and not being immediately rewarded for it. And if you're a woman in business or someone building something of your own, this is something that will show up again and again in different forms. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it looks like wanting to give up early, feeling discouraged when things are slow, questioning your worth based on results, or shrinking when visibility doesn't feel safe. The truth is, visibility is a skill, and so is emotional regulation in the face of uncertainty. Because what determines your long-term success isn't strategy or even talent. It's your ability to stay present with yourself when things aren't immediately working. It's your ability to keep showing up without abandoning yourself in the process. That moment I witnessed wasn't really about one woman packing up early. It was a reminder of how many people quietly disconnect themselves when outcomes don't match expectations, and how often we associate results with worth, when in reality they are two very different things. So if you're listening to this and you're building something, a business, a brand, a version of yourself that requires visibility, here are a few things to reflect on. Can you stay with yourself when things feel uncertain instead of rushing to exit the experience? Can you continue showing up even when validation isn't immediate? Can you separate your worth from your results? And where might you be abandoning yourself when things feel uncomfortable? Because the work isn't external, it's internal regulation, it's identity, it's nervous system capacity. That moment at the event reminded me that success isn't just about what you do when things are going well. It's about how you respond when they're not. It's about whether you stay, whether you continue, whether you trust yourself enough to keep going, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. And sometimes the real win isn't the sale, the outcome, or the visible result. It's staying in the room with yourself. So if this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're someone who knows you're ready to step more fully into your identity, whether that's in business, in visibility, or in self-trust, this is exactly the kind of work we explore inside my one-to-one coaching container, Becoming Her. It's a space for you to work through the internal patterns, emotional blocks, and identity shifts that are required to show up consistently and powerfully in your life and business. And if you're a small business owner or someone in a space similar, I am also considering running a workshop around this, so I'd genuinely love to know if that's something you'd be interested in. You can reach out, message me, or let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, and for spending this time with me. Until next time, take good care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at @the_grateful_living.